Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mr. Carlson's Lab. The owner of this radio would like to know whether it's safe to leave the radio plugged in or not. There was a restoration done on this radio by somebody else some time ago, and the owner has requested that Mr. Carlson's Lab does an inspection on it and finds out whether the restoration needs another restoration. So today I'm going to share that with you. Let's get started. Whoever did the restoration on the cabinet of this radio did a very, very nice job. That looks very nice. So the cabinetry is very, very nice. We don't know what the radio is like inside yet, and that's what we're going to find out. So I have this plugged into my isolation transformer and current limited variac supply, and the owner was using this just recently and claims it's okay to turn on, so we have to take their word for it at this point. And as you can see, we have a little light up here. And if we move the band switch, this should move down. And it does. So this lights up next to the band that's active. You can see the eye tube is a nice bright green. That's an indication of a recent repair or restoration. If you ever purchase one of these older radios, don't expect the eye tube to work. Almost all of them are dead when you purchase these things. I've noticed one thing here already. The eye tube is crooked. So it's off to the side, so the actual tube needs to be twisted inside. Not a big deal. It's just in a bracket. You can rotate the tube so the opening is basically even from the bottom. So this should, open evenly from the bottom down here. Just a little bit of a twist. And if we take a look at the dial glass on the radio, you'll see that we see a lot of bars up here, but very few down here. And you'll also notice that the light is here, and they're not in line with the bands. So the dial glass has slid down, so that needs to be moved up just a little bit. So this is the tuning control, and that's very, very smooth, so that's nice. You'll notice that the knobs on these older radios deform. That's just the plastic going away on these things. It's actually very hard to find a radio like this with the knobs that aren't cracked or deformed in some way. This one is doing okay, and as you can see, these are, again, they're kind of rough looking. Not bad. I think this one is the worst one here. So you have a volume and a tone control here, and this is pretty close to the cabinet itself, so it needs a felt behind it or it's going to scrape this. And they're binding. Again, the knobs are kind of deformed a little bit. You can see I can actually move this in and out. So that's tone, and that's volume there. And it is trying to receive. I don't have an antenna on it right now. So yeah, that definitely needs a piece of felt behind there, or it's going to scrape the finish off there again. So a few things there, not bad. Nice bright eye, that is really nice to see. So back this out here. So let's take a look at the back side here. So it's looking pretty good. It's nice and clean. Somebody has repainted the transformer. Looks like maybe the audio tube is replaced. That's pretty shiny for an audio tube there. One of the things, let's see here. It is trying to receive, which is a good sign. That's me touching the antenna post there. So what I'll do is I'll just turn this down. I don't want to leave this on for too long. In fact, maybe I'll just turn this off. And that might be safer that way. And as you can see in the back here, I'm already seeing stuff that I don't like. Somebody's put tape on this and wrapped it all the way down. Why not just replace that wire, or put some heat shrink on, color matched or something like that? So this wire really, this old cloth wire, is not hard to find if you want that to look original, but that tape just does not look good. So when I see stuff like this running down into the chassis, it looks like that's running down under there. That's already a warning sign. Let's get the chassis out of this thing and see what's going on the underside here. So the radio is unplugged, and this here is attaching the radio to the speaker. Now the speaker has a field coil on it, so basically it's an electromagnetic speaker, and it also has an audio transformer on it. So these wires here carry B+ or elevated voltage from the power supply in this radio. So always be careful when you remove this plug. Never remove this plug while the radio is on. The radio always has to be off, and the capacitors should be, drained or discharged. Since this radio is actually working, and when you shut the radio off, it cuts the AC supply to the transformer, the tubes in here, in very short order, drain the power supply right off. All right. So if you're ever working on one of these things, know that there are elevated voltages in these radios, and if you're following along, you're doing so at your own risk. Be careful. All right, so remove this, just like so. So there is an index on here. There are two larger pins on that plug, and they plug into the two larger pins in here. Now, in order to get this off, it's just a flathead screw there. Not a big deal about that. Now, before you want to remove any of the bolts on the chassis, it looks like they've added some spacers or something under there, right? Doesn't look like it's very sturdy either, but so before we do that, we want to make sure that we take the knobs off, because we don't want to damage the knobs anymore, because they look like they've had a pretty rough life. So just remove the screw and that, just like so. This one has a felt under it. That's kind of nice. You can actually see the scoring there, even with the felt. This one here will definitely have some screws in it to tighten this onto that shaft, because this, let's see, where is that? Where is that screw? It looks like it's in on an angle. There it is. And I think there might be one on this side as well. Nice positive fit there. So there is a felt on that one as well. And I don't think there is one on this. So remove this one here. That one should, nope, there is no felt on that one. So that definitely needs a felt, and you can see how that's grinding away on there. All right, so those are out of the way. So now it's safe to pull the radio out. Once we get these two screws, that looks like that might be 7/16 or something like that here. So I've got to go get a socket to get these out. These are 7/16 bolts in here. Usually, these Rogers radios have a, I don't know, focus there, have a Robertson type large screw. There it is. Yeah, interesting. Another one on this side. Not very easy to get at with that transformer in the way. If you can see that. Probably not. Hand is in the way. There we go. Okay. Push this forward. We should be in. Look at that. Put this down here. Look at this. I don't like that. What is this? Some sort of interesting spacer that's been stuffed under there for some reason. This is the kind of stuff I don't like seeing. This stuff right here. Okay, I'm going to get the cabinet out of the way, and I'll get the chassis up here, and we'll take a closer look at the chassis. Let's see if the push buttons work. They do. So that's a good sign. Now, this could move a whole lot smoother. So as you can see, this whole mechanism is just filthy. So that could have definitely been cleaned quite a bit better. We can see on the top side here some heat shrink and some modern wiring. So obviously the cloth wiring had broken, and that was replaced into the little lamp sockets here. One here and one here. So now we need to get onto the bottom side. Just move this here like so, being careful of the rectifier tube. Put this down like so. We have the tuning controls on the bottom here. And that's what that square cutout in the wood is inside the case, so that you can actually get to these controls. So what I'm going to do is, yeah, it looks pretty sturdy. That should be okay. So I will remove this bottom. Now there's screws missing. There's a screw missing here and a screw missing here, which isn't a good thing. There is one here, so let's see what we're up against here. It's coming out pretty easy, hasn't cross-threaded. So there's only one there. This screw is missing. I don't know if you can see this here. So this screw is missing, this screw is missing. So there's only one screw here and possibly one on the other side here. Yes, it's a different screw. I will move over here and remove that. Pardon the movement of the camera there. So this should have screws all the way around. That's a shielded bottom panel and it needs to be nice and tight. So the oscillator in here is nice and stable. It was missing this screw here completely. That's why that chassis was moving around. So we only had two screws here. That other one was from the bottom. So this thing is missing just a lot of screws. So there we go. Let's move this out of the way. So what do you think we're going to see in here? Let's find out. Pretty tight on the front side here. Let me just grab this and try and pop this off. There it is. And I'll zoom on into this. I'll get the camera more straight down. I'll be right back. Looking at the bottom side of the chassis here, it's quite a hodgepodge of just different types of capacitors. You got all sorts of different kinds of caps all over the place in here. Discs and poly and all sorts of interesting things here. So the filter caps were replaced over here and they're on a terminal tie strip, and it looks to me like the soldering iron that's being used is a little bit too cool. A lot of the solder connections on here don't look like they are flowing quite nicely. The line cord is a pretty good example of that. You can see that. I'll zoom right into that. So get you right over here and move that out of the way. Look at the line cord here. You can see the hole there, right? So this out of the way. And you can see that. So as you can see the soldering here close up too. Right, look at this, right? So hotter soldering iron definitely needed. So it looks like the line cord is running to some form of a fuse holder, and they've used heat shrink, which is good. That's, many times I see black tape and I see all sorts of scary things. So this little fuse holder is in here. There are no ratings on the fuse holder, so whether that's rated for 120 or not is another thing. Let's see what's going on in here. Small fuse. And that is 1 amp, 250 volts, so pretty close to what it should most likely be. So, and it's slow. And you see a little coily wire in there. Right. So whether this is actually, again, whether this fuse holder is rated for 120, I can't see any ratings on it anywhere. And it is, basically, I guess you could say clamped to the chassis. So I'm a real big fan of rated fuse holders. So that looks like it could be a lower voltage fuse holder. Now you can see that there's a little bit of red wire coming out of here. Usually, red wire coming out of a fuse holder indicates automotive application or something like that. So it looks like it's also, chances are this is a pull from something. A nice short wire coming out of it, things like that. So again, that one is a great big nope. So we have more soldering connections here. It kind of almost looks like the J-hooking method. So the J-hooking method is where you bend a wire over a wire and then solder it like that. So I'm not a big fan of that. Functional, yeah, possibly, but just not a big fan of that. So you can see that we have two capacitors in series here, and we have a piece of heat shrink on it, and the heat shrink is actually on the chassis with the soldering connection inside. It's always a good idea to raise something like this just a little bit off the chassis so this isn't resting on the chassis, so that connection isn't right up against the metal right there. We have flying leads right here. You know, there should be something supporting this wire. As you can see, it's just a flying lead soldered to one end of the capacitor. And then this end to ground, as you can see, have a tie that comes off of the actual chassis, indicating that the iron that's being used for this is too cold. So you need a larger iron, like a Weller type of, like a soldering gun even will work very well for this. I have many videos on the Weller type of soldering tools that will work for this. So you don't need to do this. You can actually solder directly to the correct post. So you can see it's been snipped, and then they're using the remaining wire, and this is a bit of thermal relief between the joint and the chassis here. Again, not a fan of flying leads like that. That should have a terminal tie strip holding that. Not sure if these capacitors are counterfeits. They look like they may be. The way that the shrink is over the edge like that. So they look like those may be counterfeit caps. I'd have to look at that further. Yeah, just a hodgepodge of different things. You can see more flying leads. You can see that down there. Another flying lead right in the center there. So just nothing is supporting this. It's just the two center leads of this cap, and then this is running off down here and soldered to here, and that's going to somewhere else. Yeah, just all sorts of different components. Look at this, just flying in midair like this. Oh, did that actually break off? I was touching something. I think it did break off. So, stuff like that. So, the person that did this, so from what I can tell from this already, okay, the person that did this looks like they mean well. And I don't say that lightly. I've worked on many restorations after restorations, and it looks like the person that did this, you know, meant well with the components that they had, but they need better tools. You can see this here again. It's cut here, and then that's thermal relief to the chassis, so they're tying to that one lead where these should both be wrapped around this point right here. Whether the voltage rating of these caps is up to par, I don't know, because there is no voltage rating on these particular caps. They just have an actual value on them. So we do have carbon film resistors down here. They're twisted together. Again, more flying leads in the middle of the air, just like this. Nothing supporting that, just kind of hanging out. So the cap is replaced in the oscillator section. This is a little design here for stability. I will go over that when I do a Rogers radio, but you can see this one here has been replaced with a mica, which is proper, so that's done right. Again, soldered to the remaining lead, right? So, yeah, is it safe to be left plugged in? Well, again, I don't know, there's no rating on this, and it looks like a 12-volt device, so I wouldn't say so. I would say that this should be replaced with a proper fuse holder. And whether that is in line with the hot or the neutral, let's take a look at the plug here. Is it polarized? So the plug is not polarized, so the fuse can be in line with either side. So as I mentioned, a really good idea for safety in these is to install a polarized plug. And then the hot side of the plug always goes to the fuse first, and then everything downstream later on. Reason being that if the switch shorts to the chassis or anything happens, the fuse is always the first thing in line with the hot lead. So again, you're dealing with older components in here, and if something shorts to the chassis or something, you know, again, the fuse is the very first thing. And of course, it's a low value fuse. The fuse that was chosen for this looks to be very close, so that was a smart choice there. So yeah, again, would I suggest this whole radio be completely gone over again? Yes, I would. Would I say that it is, truly safe to be left plugged in? I'd have to say nope. So it does need a lot of work. So depending on whether the owner of this radio wants this to be gone through again, we may have another project ahead of us down the road here. We'll maybe go through this again. We'll see what happens with that. So that's the rundown of this. And of course, there's things on the upper chassis that could be cleaned up, that wire, and of course that entire block where the push buttons were, that could be all cleaned off. That was just absolutely filthy. So I'll just flip this over and give you a better idea of that. So you can see how filthy that is. Look at this thing. It's just disgusting. Look at this down here. So stuff like that could just be taken off and cleaned up. So all in all, yes, I do think this could use a second restoration. Thanks for stopping by the lab today. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you are enjoying my videos, you can let me know by giving me a big thumbs up and hang around. There'll be more videos like this coming in the very near future. We'll be taking a look at vacuum tube and solid state electronic devices alike. So lots of great stuff coming. If you're interested in taking your electronics knowledge to the next level and learning electronics in a very different and effective way and gaining access to many of my personal electronic inventions and designs, you're definitely going to want to check out my ongoing electronics course on Patreon. I'll put the link just below the video's description under the Show More tab, and I'll pin the link at the top of the comment section. So if you click on the link, it'll take you right there. All right, until next time, take care. Bye for now.